good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Tonight we have a very special webinar with Tom Nisani. Tom Nisani is a secular Jew who founded the organization Biadenu, Returning to the Temple Mount, a movement to promote the Temple Mount as a national symbol for all Israelis. He served in the IDF Intelligence Corps, has a BA from Hebrew University and an MA from the College of Law and Business in Ramat Gan. And tonight, this afternoon, he'll be speaking on the subject of Israel is losing on the Temple Mount, why this matters supremely. Tom will present for about 15 minutes, and then we will open it up for questions. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box, even during the presentation, and we'll get to them as soon as Tom has finished his presentation. Tom, if you'd like to begin.
Yeah, sure. First, thank you all.
Raise the volume on your microphone.
I wanted to say first, thank you to the Middle East Forum for inviting me and having me here. It's a big pleasure to talk with you and all of your supporters and listeners. And I will be very glad to speak about in my eyes, my view, the most important issue in Israel nowadays, which is the Temple Mount. And I will explain why and how this is the most important issue and mission in my perspective. I want to do it with some presentation, a short one that I have to show you a few important things. I will just share it. One moment, please. Okay, I hope you can see it clearly. Okay, so let's begin. Actually, the most important thing about the situation on the Temple Mount is that maybe the only place that we lose every day since we got back and conquered and liberated Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem in 67 is the Temple Mount. From back then, on 67, the Israeli flag was raised above the Dome of the Rock for a few hours, and then has been removed quickly. From back then until now, responsibility of the Temple Mount was given by Moshe Dayan, as we know, to the Jordanian Waqf, and that means from back then until today, no Israeli sovereignty on the Temple Mount, the most important place, the most holiest and sacred place to Judaism, is nowadays not under Israeli sovereignty. And I say that we lose there every day because let's say every holiday that the Arab, the Muslim community in Israel has becomes, actually the Temple Mount becomes a site for harassment, for incitement, for pictures like you see above on the presentation of graffiti made all over the Temple Mount, little kids playing with guns inside the Temple Mount freely. This is only two little examples. All of this happening while Israelis are limited in many ways. I guess you all know about the thing that the Israeli government prevents Jews from praying on the Temple Mount from 67 until now. And even to get inside the compound of the Temple Mount is very difficult to whoever born to be Jew. You can enter only 4 hours per day, not included Friday and Saturday, while Arabs feel free. And this is in my, I always like to say this is their safe zone. The Temple Mount is in very much ways the safe zone for the Arab community in Jerusalem. It means that the police is not very active inside, and many of the terrorist attacks lately in the past few years happened from inside the Temple Mount because it's their safe zone. I want to show you some very short video that will show you some little examples of it, just to it will be some impression. Just a moment, sorry. Okay, I hope you can hear and see it. Okay, so I will get back to the presentation. As you can see, the Temple Mount under the sovereignty actually of Jordan and the Palestinians and many other countries except Israel becomes a place or a big playground, like some big playground in Jerusalem. Or it became a place for devastating antiques and the Jewish heritage, and actually the heritage of all nations. And how the Palestinians, and not only them, the Jordanians and the Turk and the Qatar and many other countries that allow themselves to intervene in what's happening in Jerusalem, they see the whole Temple Mount, you can see 144 dunams, as an Islamic site for Muslims only. And this is how they act. They actually try always to keep us out. Even ascending the Temple Mount is something that for them is unacceptable. And we should understand their side right now of the story. And another important issue is the status quo, which has not really existed. And why I say it? Because simply, if you go back in time and see what Moshe Dayan demanded the Waqf, he said that at least you should give Israelis the right to enter freely to the Temple Mount whenever they want, without praying. But even that is not happening today. Like I said before, Israelis can enter the Temple Mount only 4 hours a day, not including Friday and Saturday. From 67 until now, 3 new mosques were built illegally on the Temple Mount, which is another violation of the status quo. And you can see here below on the photos that actually until 67, the Temple Mount was a place that no one really care about. No one cared about the Temple Mount until the moment that Israel liberated Jerusalem and conquered the Temple Mount. Suddenly the Waqf became very active and started to make changes on the Temple Mount, including hiding rocks and many things that proved that there has been temples on the mount. Nowadays, they just say that there is no real evidence of temples on the Temple Mount, and that's why it's a Muslim site only. What is happening from the Israeli side? You can see that numbers of Israeli Jewish ascenders to the mount is growing significantly in the past years. You have here 2 years of Corona, of course, that was different, but you can see in 2022, which is on the very right, we are now close to 26,000 ascenders, and we're only in the middle of the year. So we will probably reach something like 50,000 or a bit less, which is supposed to be the year with the biggest number of Israelis that ascended to the mount. All of this happening while the government, not many people talk about it, but the last government in Israel that collapsed lately started collapsing because of the Temple Mount. On the last Ramadan, which was in the same time of Passover, the Ram party got out of the coalition for the first time, and all of the members of the party of Yamina said that they got out of the government finally because what happened on the Temple Mount. This connected to the last dot, which is growing awareness in the Israeli public of the importance of the Temple Mount, but still we have a lot of fear to deal with the Temple Mount because it's in the media and even in the Supreme Court, they always say and repeat that the Temple Mount is a place that can bomb and fire all of Israel, and you should not deal with it. And that's why the flag that was raised for 10 days in last April was this flag, the PLO flag, which was finally removed after we made enough media noise and talked with a lot of members of Knesset, and finally the flag was removed. But this was the flag that was raised on the Dome of the Rock just lately. Finally, I will end by saying this. I believe, and we believe, that the message to the extremists in the current situation is that they have won Israel. Israel is standing down and retreat every time that the Muslim threatening us that there will be terror attacks because we are going up to the Temple Mount or praying or no matter what. We believe that what begins on the Temple Mount will eventually happen throughout Israel, and I believe that we already see it. We can see that the levels of incitement and the levels of violence on the Temple Mount is going slowly out to the west of Jerusalem and even to Jaffa and other places. We saw it last year. And we have to know that as long as the Temple Mount is on their hands and not in our hands, it is a big sign for them to know that the dream to end the Jewish state is alive. And as long as we don't go back and get the Temple Mount to our hands again, we will keep on losing, and we might even lose the state of Israel. That's why I believe that the Temple Mount is the most important issue nowadays. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Tom. If you could stop the share screen, thank you. We have a few questions. We'll start with, you've talked about how the Arab side is winning. What would, or how would you describe an Israel victory on the Temple Mount? How would that look like? What would be the steps that you would take, and how would you prevent, for example, this sort of all-out war that's constantly being threatened?
Yeah, so this is a very good question, because unfortunately, every time that we promote the Temple Mount issues, many people shouting and yelling that you want to destroy and you want to make a war, and we're not there at all. Actually, we're trying and always getting connections with Emiratis, with even Arab Israelis that can talk with us and promote a solution. We will be happy to try and find the way. First, actually things has been changed lately. Nowadays, Jews can pray on the Temple Mount quietly. We can even sing the Israeli national anthem and raise Israeli flag. That many things like that happened in last Jerusalem Day and Independence Day. I believe that we can promote Israeli and Jewish rights slowly. We can declare or just act by let Jewish pray be heard on the Temple Mount. Nothing will happen. I really believe that nothing will happen, and we can do it slowly by letting Jews walking on the Temple Mount freely. After it, we will accept Jews' entrance in more hours, to expand the hours to get inside the Temple Mount. More Jews will come and be able to get inside the Temple Mount, and finally it will make the situation become as we will feel free to have the Israeli flag inside and pray. And then the way will be very clear and short to sovereignty, because it will come after it. This is what I would do.
Thank you for that. We've got a number of questions. The first one deals with, that issue that comes up about the rabbinical opinions that should Jews be allowed to go up to the Temple Mount. I know that is to a certain extent, a bit of a myth that is perpetrated amongst certain religious communities. I know you self-define as a secular Jew. Do you feel comfortable answering that question?
About about the religious.
There's this myth that or not myth, there is a ban by certain groups or certain rabbis about ascending the Temple Mount. What do you say to people who say it's forbidden according to Jewish law? Yeah,
well, I'm not a rabbi, as you can see, but I can say that I learned the issue, and I can say clearly and easily that the rabbis that call not to go up to the Temple Mount is the same rabbis that were calling not to go to Eretz Israel because you should not do it, and God will take us to the promised land. Finally, thanks to Herzl and others, we are here. And on the Temple Mount, it's the same. There is no, in the Torah, there is no such thing that prevent Jews from going up to the Temple Mount. There is a certain place which is very small, the place that where the temples stood, that most of the Jews are not ascending there. By the way, there are plenty, even rabbis that go up even to this place, but the Temple Mount compound nowadays is 144 dunams, and you can enter it freely without any threat to your religious view. This is not something that real.
Thank you. There's a question from JL. Why is the Israeli government afraid to assert control over the Temple Mount? Because this isn't really just about this previous government. We've seen this
Yeah.
I mean, really, since back to 67, right-wing governments, left-wing governments, governments with religious, governments without. It's not specifically about one government. So why do you think that the left, the right, the center, all Israeli governments have been afraid to assert control over the Temple Mount?
Yeah, well, I can say that we are really frustrated about it because in Israel, the Israeli public, not only on the Temple Mount issue, we want the state to act differently for threats of terrorist attacks, and whoever takes the law and throw it to the garbage and decide to act violently. Unfortunately, not only on the Temple Mount, we see it all across Israel, that became a place for murders and attacks, and you can drive on the Negev and see, Bedouin gangs attack you on the streets. It started from the Temple Mount. We have the police and the state and the government and all of the authorities became real afraid of dealing with violence, which is for me a real crisis, because me as I was in the army, I served the country, I cannot accept a situation where I'm attacked and I getting arrested for praying because someone else threatened my life. This is the situation. I don't really have the reason for it, but we have to fight it, and we're doing it to change it, the situation.
Speaking of which, there's a question about education, because as well as getting people to ascend the Temple Mount, there's a large effort in Israel, but around the world, to disconnect the Temple Mount from the Jewish people. What are you doing, or what's your organization, or what should be done to educate the public in Israel and around the world the importance and the connection of the Temple Mount to Israel, especially an organization like yours, which is run by a secular Jew?
Yeah, well, this is maybe the most important issue, really, and we're dealing it a few years, because I can inform everyone here that the Temple Mount in Israel is not studied at all. Not Haredim, not religious, not secular. Nobody learn about the Temple Mount in Israel, which is a real disaster, because when you see Arab MKs talking on the Knesset about the Temple Mount, which is a Muslim site, most of the time people don't know how to answer, because they don't know. When I first ascended to the Temple Mount in 2013, I didn't even know that there was two temples where I standing. And this is the situation in Israel. This is not something that's happening by coincidence. Sorry. It is happening because Israel decided back in '67 to educate Israelis that the Kotel is the most important site, which we will not accept, and that's why we're making two things. First is to educate ourselves. We're having lectures in many mechinot, pre-academy,
Pre-army academies.
yeah, right, and schools, and we go wherever we can to educate young people about the Temple Mount. And we're working very hard on the Knesset. On the last government, we made it to the education committee made a statement that the Temple Mount should be studied on Israeli education programs. I hope that in the next government we will make it in action, that actually people will start learning. But you have to understand that in 50 years, or maybe from the beginning of the State of Israel, nobody learned about the Temple Mount, and we have to change it right now.
I'd like to ask, you say that you've been working in the Knesset. My assumption would be the right-wing religious parties are your most important allies here. Are there any other parties or politicians that you're surprised by outside of that community which support what you're trying to do, maybe on the basis of freedom of religion, freedom of expression? Are you trying to argue with more centrist or left-wing parties on those levels? And have you been surprised by any support you've seen outside of the right-wing religious bloc?
Yeah, well, actually we have connections with a few MKs on the center or left parties. Of course, it's not the majority of the MKs that we work with. But yes, we have connections in almost every party except the left, the extreme left. Yeah, because actually we have on the Temple Mount the primary issue is my right as a Jew to ascend, my right to pray, my right to live in a democracy in a modern state, and this is something that is not exist right now, and so we have allies in many parties.
And final question, are you optimistic that eventually Israel will win on the Temple Mount? Is it because the trends are improving about the numbers of people are going up? Or do you think that an Israeli government will come and say enough is enough? Or you think the Arab world will come to an understanding that the Jews also have rights on their holiest site? What do you see as the trends, and do you see Israel eventually winning?
Yeah, I think that we will win finally. As I love to say, I don't think that I will see any temple built in my life, but maybe my son and grandson will. I think that in everything that you mentioned right now, first of all, the Abraham Accords can be something that will change things. Jordan and the Palestinians for now doing everything they can to get us out and incite against us, and we have to finally show them the way out. I think also by the numbers, we have a lot of people in the Israeli public that are going up to the mountain. They care about the Temple Mount more and more, which will finally change the situation, because you cannot handle 5,000 Jews on the Temple Mount that praying. You cannot arrest anybody, everyone, 5,000 people. And finally, you can see even on the government and on the Knesset, the Temple Mount becoming an issue that is bothering many members of Knesset, and that's because they see that the Israeli public is there. I think before 10 years or 20 years, nobody really cared about the Temple Mount and talked about it, and we managed to change it. So I'm totally positive, but I'm really worried about the price, because the price we'll pay until then will be harsh and will be hard and painful, because every day that they see the Temple Mount as their place, it's their safe zone to promote terror attacks and incitement, and it costs in blood, unfortunately.
On that note, thank you very much, Tom, for your time and your presentation. On Wednesday, I'm giving my weekly Israel Insider webinar. We'll be looking back at President Biden's trip to the region, to Israel, to Saudi Arabia, looking at the successes and failures, and what does it mean for the Israeli political scene as we start with the campaign for the upcoming elections. Thank you again, Tom, to you for your presentation. Thank you to all of you attending, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Have a good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.